Late evening, your phone vibrates and a message appears on the screen from someone you've known for years. Not a colleague, not a casual acquaintance, but someone close. A friend, brother, sister, cousin, sometimes even a parent. The tone is calm, almost matter of fact. Look, it's embarrassing to ask, but you can borrow a little before your paycheck. No big deal, just for a couple of weeks. And at that moment, a strange mixture of feelings turns on inside. On the one hand, it seems like a small thing, ordinary human help. On the other hand, you're already feeling the pressure, even though no one is threatening you, because it's not just difficult to refuse, it's like a shame to refuse. The thought immediately pops into my head, and if I say no, what will he think of me? And if he thinks I'm greedy, and if I need help later and they tell me no too, and you haven't even answered yet, and you're already making excuses in your head. The most insidious thing here is that it looks like a safe transaction. No bank, no interest, no paperwork, no cold formalities, only trust. Only proximity, only friendship, and that is why such loans often become more than just a financial problem. They become an emotional trap that changes relationships quietly, imperceptibly, but very deeply. Because money between loved ones is almost never just money. They turn into expectations, go to control, a sense of duty that is not always expressed in words. The tension that comes out of meetings, in pauses in correspondence. At the very moment when you are sitting at the same table, you smile, but somewhere inside you already have a question spinning, and he remembers at all, and he's going to give it back. And I have to remind you or keep silent. And if I remind you, will I look petty? And here comes the most frustrating part. In the bank, everything is simple. There is a deadline, there is an amount, there are rules, there are consequences. It may be harsh, but it's fair. And between friends and family, there's often none of that. There is a vague explanation. Eat later. There is a little later. Eat next week. And there's your awkwardness. Because you don't want to be the kind of person who ruins relationships over money. Although if you think about it, the relationship is already deteriorating, just slowly and without loud scandals. Many people tell the same story, but with different names and amounts. At first, it seems like a small gesture. You help and even feel like a good person. Then a week, 2 weeks, a month passes. You don't want to remind me. Then there is a moment when you see each other and you notice that the person buys something that is not the most necessary. New phone number, trip, restaurant, and that's when the first irritation appears inside, which you try to suppress. You tell yourself, don't draw conclusions, he has his own life, he may have reasons, but the irritation has already appeared, and it's not about money, it's about justice. Now imagine the other side. A person who has borrowed money also begins to feel tense. Even if he is a good person and is really going to return it, he starts avoiding the topic. It may write less frequently. May not invite you to meetings, because every interaction with you reminds him of his duty. Even if you don't say anything, the debt exists, and sometimes he becomes like a shadow that stands between you. You both feel it, but no one wants to say it out loud. That's why borrowing from friends and family is so dangerous. They trigger a psychological mechanism that is almost impossible to control without clear rules. This mechanism makes it so that one person begins to feel like a creditor, and the other begins to feel like a debtor. And as soon as these roles are fixed, the relationship ceases to be equal. Even if you try to behave as before, even if you laugh at the same jokes, even if you say that everything is fine, the system has already changed inside. And if you think that the only problem is that people don't get their money back, that's not entirely true. The most unpleasant thing happens even when the money is returned. Because the very fact of debt changes perception. You start counting, not only money, but also gestures. Who made how much? Who owes how much? Who has helped how many times? And it destroys friendships not like an explosion, but like a slow corrosion. Quiet, no scenes, but irreversible. Now I want to do one important thing. I won't say that you can't help your loved ones. I will not say that you should never lend money. The reality is more complicated. Sometimes it really saves a person. Sometimes this is the only bridge through a difficult moment. But I want to show why this solution almost always carries a hidden price. And most importantly, how to accept it in a way that does not destroy either your finances, your relationships, or your own sense of calm. Let's start with the most important question. Why do we agree so easily at all? Why a person can refuse a bad purchase in a store 100 times, but can't say no to a loved one when asked for money? And the answer here is not in logic. The answer is in psychology, in fear of being bad, in fear of losing contact, in the habit of earning approval. The fact that for many of us, the word no in the family sounds like a betrayal, even if it's just a border. And this is exactly what the situation uses. Even if no one is trying to manipulate you, the very design of the request is already creating pressure. Because when a loved one asks for money, they rarely ask only for money. He's asking for confirmation that you're on his side. And if you refuse, he may hear "I can't, but I don't want to." He can't hear right now and I don't care. And your brain knows it, so he pushes you to make the simplest decision. Just transfer money and avoid a tense conversation. But avoiding the conversation doesn't remove the tension. It simply takes him into the future, and it almost always makes it stronger, because then there is a second conversation, which is more difficult than the first one. Remind, to ask, to clarify, and this moment most often breaks the relationship, not because someone is bad, but because both people feel trapped. One is afraid to look greedy, the other is afraid of looking ungrateful, and there's a growing silence between them. If you've ever lent money and then found yourself feeling uncomfortable even bringing it up, you know what I mean. And if you've ever borrowed money and then avoided meetings or texts because you didn't want to feel guilty again, you know that too. This is not uncommon. This is no exception. This is a basic human reaction, and that is why smart people who make adequate financial decisions in everyday life make the most painful mistakes on this topic. I'll now move on to the next step. I will analyze 3 hidden pitfalls of such loans. The first trap is the lack of clear rules. The second trap is emotional interest, which increases every day. And the third pitfall is that such loans almost always turn into a relationship test that no one asked you to take. The first pitfall is that the loan doesn't have a form. Everything in the bank is strict. Term, amount, payments, consequences. Everything is blurred between loved ones, and blurring seems like kindness. But blurriness is the absence of rules. And when there are no rules, everyone draws them in their head. You think it's for 2 weeks. He thinks when it will work out. You think that at the first opportunity he will return. He believes that first you need to close everything urgent and the debt will wait because you are close. So there are 2 realities, and without a single scandal, tension settles in the relationship. The second trap is emotional interest. Bank interest can be calculated. Emotional ones are not, but they grow every day. You gave the money and now part of your peace of mind depends on someone else's behavior, whether he will return it, whether he will remember, whether he will respect your borders. You start noticing little things, purchases, delivery, cafe, not because you're angry, but because your brain is fixated on security-related things. One story from the restaurant and inside clicks. You don't know the context, but the brain draws out the uncertainty itself, usually for the worse, and it makes you colder even if you're polite on the outside. The third trap is the relationship test. You may not want to admit it out loud, but there's a hidden check inside. If he appreciates me, he'll pay me back in time. If he is an adult, he will remind you. If he respects me, he won't make me ask. And he also runs a test. If you're a friend, you won't push. If you're close, you'll understand. And you're both taking an exam that no one agreed on. The rules are different. The score is strict and the stakes are friendship. The fourth trap is a new role. At the time of the loan, you are no longer just friends or relatives. You become a creditor and a debtor. Even if the amount is small, the dynamics change. You start waiting, he starts avoiding. Shame turns to silence. Silence turns to distance. And often everything ends not with words, but with the fact that you just communicate less often. And one day you notice that the relationship seems to have disappeared. The fifth trap is social media. Before, you wouldn't have seen someone else's life every day. Now you see. And if a person owes you money, any frame of their ordinary life is perceived as a signal, so there is money. This is almost always a cognitive error, but the emotion still appears. You start comparing. He lives and you wait. He buys and you put up with it. And this accelerates the breakup because the brain receives triggers regularly. The sixth trap is the illusion of help. Often a person asks from relatives when they have already exhausted more stringent options. He doesn't want the bank. It's already painful for the credit card, and it's hard to save money. You become the last soft option, and the brain doesn't prioritize soft options. It first closes what is scary and has immediate consequences. Penalties, credit cards, payments. Debt doesn't call a friend, therefore it is postponed, even if the person is not evil and not a fraudster. It's just that psychology works in such a way that the urgent always wins over the important. The seventh trap is dependence on an expensive basis. When you give money out of fear of losing a relationship, you're not paying out of generosity, but out of anxiety, and it's almost guaranteed to turn into anger later. Because the money went away not because you wanted to help, but because you were afraid to say no. And fear always turns to annoyance when the consequences come, and you end up feeling used even if no one wanted to use you. Now the most important frame. There are only 3 healthy scenarios. The first one is a gift. You give, and inwardly you immediately forgive. If they return it, it's nice. If you don't collapse. The second is a loan with rules. Amount, term, refund method, and specifics. Not necessarily a legal document, but clarity. The third is rejection, calm and short. The most toxic scenario is the fourth one that almost everyone chooses. You give as a friend, but you wait like a bank. Outwardly friendship, inside accounting. It's slowly killing both you and the person in front of you. If you want to avoid this trap, you don't need to become a tough person. You need to become a clear person. Clarity doesn't destroy relationships, it destroys uncertainty. So before you give money, ask yourself one question. If this person doesn't return it, I can live with it in peace. If the answer is no, it's not a loan. It's stress that you buy with your own money. And then you have 2 options. Either you refuse or turn it into a gift, because a gift is more honest than a debt that you will carry in your head. If you do lend money, do it in a way that doesn't turn friendship into a game of silence. You don't need pathos, you need a simple conversation. Tell us the amount, tell us the deadline, and tell us exactly how to return it. By a single amount or in installments. On what day? In what way? And most importantly, tell me that it's not the money itself that matters to you, but predictability. You don't demand, you negotiate. That doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you an adult. And yes, sometimes it feels awkward. But honestly, think about what's more awkward. One short conversation now or months of tension later, when you'll find a moment to ask and hate yourself for even getting involved in it. Awkwardness lasts for a minute, and unspoken resentment can last for a year. And if you can't help, don't explain yourself too long. Long excuses sound like an invitation to bargain. A short phrase is enough. I can't do it now. I have my own obligations, period. Your task is not to convince the person. Your task is to preserve the border. People who respect you will hear this. People who try to push through will be offended. And this is also information. It is unpleasant, but useful. Another important point that almost no one says out loud. If a person asks to borrow again when the previous debt has not yet been closed, this is no longer a request for help. This is a pattern. It's a way to live off an external cushion without facing the consequences of your decisions. At this point, you stop being a friend or relative and become part of their financial system. You're closing a hole that he doesn't want to or doesn't know how to close. And each new money transfer does not solve the problem, but postpones the moment when a person will have to change something. Here it is important to understand one tough but honest thing. Refusal in such a situation is not cruelty. This is the only chance not to maintain chaos. Close the past first, then discuss the new rule. This is not a cold calculation. This is the border that protects you both. Without it, help turns into an endless cycle where one always saves and the second always sinks. And the last and most important thing, money between loved ones is almost never just about money. They're always about trust, power, expectations, and shame. But trust doesn't mean no boundaries. True trust can easily withstand the rules, deadlines, and agreements. It is not afraid of the phrase, let's clearly state the conditions. It breaks down not from an honest conversation, but from silence. From understatement, from a situation where one is waiting for a return and is angry, and the second avoids messages and feels guilty. This is how friendships and families are destroyed, not because of the amount, but because of the accumulated tension. Therefore, the best way to maintain a relationship is not to save at all costs, and not to play the role of a quiet sponsor, but to help so that later there are no hidden accounts, internal resentment, and the feeling that you were used. If you've learned your life here, if you've ever felt this strange mix of guilt, anger, and embarrassment over money with your loved ones, please like and subscribe. There will be conversations about money without moralizing and without pressure. Only psychology and real solutions that help save both finances and relationships.